live.
Yeah.
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 So we don't have that 1 second.
No, I know we don't. I know.
Everybody. Hello. Welcome back. It's Saturday morning here in beautiful South Florida. I don't know.
Bright and early.
Yeah, bright and early. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream.
Welcome.
Here with Danny and Randy. How's
everyone?
What up
Today?
What up? Doing well, man.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nothing better than coding or talking about coding bright and early in the morning.
I know. It's actually,
it really isn't.
I know you're being like sarcastic, but I actually do really enjoy talking about coding.
Dude, I love it. It's so fun. Dude, there's nothing better too than you guys, but like whenever you like solve a problem when you're coding a new project, dude, it feels so good when it works. Like it's the best. It really is cool.
It totally.
You like build something and then you see it actually like working. It's cool.
But I love being able to talk to other people because I try to talk to my girlfriend about it and she's like, I have no fucking clue what you're saying.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It is hard to explain when somebody has no background. It's very difficult
she's
to
like, I don't even give a shit about.
Dude, it's also one of those
magic.
Yeah.
Magic.
It's also one of those things where if you say in public that you're a developer, one of two things happen. Either the people's eyes glaze over or they're like, oh, I need a developer. Can you can you do this for me?
They're like, I have $30. Can you build me the next Spotify? Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, the purpose of today's call is to sort of, I called it front end 101, and I wasn't talking about my front end. I was talking about a website front end. Yeah. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a front end developer, how to sort of get yourself headed in that direction. And I have actually 25 tips and tricks from ChatGPT that ChatGPT gave me about how to become a front end developer. So I thought maybe we could walk through those a little bit and get everyone's opinion. And yeah, so before we do that, who wants to give like a little bit of a brief definition of what a front end developer is? Danny?
Definition, sure. So a front end developer is when you're developing client side. So you're really focused on like what the user is going to see when they're interacting with the website. That could be like static websites. It could be like the front end of a full web app, but you're really focused on really the look. So think like UI, UX design, think like styling, colors, all that. You're really in charge of like designing, from that template or that mock-up, the actual like look of it that the user is going to work with.
Yeah. So basically turning, a picture of a website into a real functioning website. And as a front end developer, you're going to be working mostly in like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or a JavaScript framework. Generally, unless you're using like low code solutions too, like you could be a front end developer and use Squarespace, WordPress, right? My favorite, WordPress.
What's interesting too, I think, with front end development is like, I do see this a lot, like, well, especially if you're doing freelance stuff. It's all up to you, like the design and everything, so you really need to get a good sense of design. But you see a lot in jobs too, where a lot of times I think front end also kind of encapsulates that too, like a bit of design as well. So I think that's also important, is having a good eye for just like what looks good, why, how to like structure things so it's easy to follow, all that.
For sure. And
at some point, I'd like to add, as much as we may mock using WordPress, like WordPress is something. When I was doing SEO back in the day, I built hundreds of WordPress websites for lots of clients, and they love them. So it certainly is like, if you're looking for a low code solution, it can be a stepping stone into doing front end web development.
It can also, those low code solutions can also give you a good idea of layout, how to format things, how to structure things too. It can be useful in that sense as well.
Yeah. When I build websites for people, I generally do offer them low code solutions too, because one, it's easier for me most of the time. Like if I want to build somebody a quick website that's like a business site and it's not complicated, building it on WordPress or Squarespace is super easy and fast, and you can still charge people a decent amount of money to do that. So if you guys are like just getting into front end web development and you want to get some like experience just designing and building, I think that's actually a really good way to learn about front end like design before you actually get into coding, because then you can sort of just like drag and drop the pieces where you want them to go and start training your eye, like what looks good versus and functions well versus just like throwing stuff on a page.
You know what I did that helped me too was I got on Canva, just like the free account, and started just mocking up sites that I liked. So I would go visit like, Airbnb or something, and then just try to mock it up just to like see like how it's structured on the page. And then, from there you can start trying to mess around building it and stuff and kind of play with things. It's nice.
Yeah.
And everyone, while you're watching this video right now, let us know down in the comments what you've messed around with. Have you made WordPress sites? Yeah. Have you done Squarespace? Have you been making your own sites, just coding from scratch, HTML, CSS, JavaScript? What's your experience with that? Because let's participate.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious about what people are using. Like, are you using mostly HTML, CSS, JavaScript? Are you using low code? Are you using frameworks? Are you using JavaScript frameworks like React or Vue or Angular? Or are you using Python? Because Danny's done a lot of Python web development too, right? So there's
design an entire
out there.
Full stack site with Python.
Yeah.
It's crazy amount of code.
Like, I don't know that stuff. Like, I know Python, but I'm not like, I wouldn't consider myself a Python web developer necessarily. When I see those files and they're like, I don't know, 8,000 lines of code. I'm like,
I don't even know. I don't know how big the whole thing is. Yeah, well, that's crazy because you're coding everything from scratch, the entire full stack, like back end, front end. I mean, all the logic. So it is a lot, and you're using HTML, CSS, jQuery, JavaScript, all that. But like, I do want to mention too, I think one thing that's good about starting with low code too is that you also see its limitations.
Yes.
And like, that is the thing about coding from scratch is you have that full freedom.
Yeah.
You can do, there's really no limitations on what you can do.
It's funny you said that, because one of the things that sort of pushed me towards like a long time ago that pushed me towards becoming like I would say real web developer, with like coding with HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
You got the merit badge, right?
Yeah, I got the Scouts merit badge. Yeah. One of the things that actually pushed me to that was like I was using Squarespace, and with Squarespace, you can't use JavaScript unless you have like a paid professional account. So you have to like pay a monthly fee just to be able to use JavaScript on your site, not to actually do anything particular with it, but just to have JavaScript code run on your site. And so, I was working with clients and my girlfriend was helping her, and she needed like JavaScript, like something, I forget what it was, like a form to be inputted or something like that. And I was like, well, this just won't work like as it is, And so then you pay for a professional, but you still have to understand how JavaScript works. Yeah. So then I was like, why am I like, at that point, it's like, why are you even using Squarespace if you already know how to just build it on your own? So then I was like, all right, I got to just like learn to do this. So, but
JavaScript's like one of the craziest languages too, because it like started out just to make like web pages like more interactive, and it's gotten so crazy now what you can do with it. It's insane.
Yeah.
Dude, and I'm pretty sure it was built and it was written in 11 days.
Yeah. It was written originally for Netscape. So it's funny because we're building this course right now, and I'm working on like the JavaScript section, and that's something that came up, which is kind of interesting, right? So it was built originally for like Netscape to like add some interactivity to it, but it was not designed for what it's used for today. So over the years, it's been like scrapped together and like pieces like thrown in and adapted.
Crazy.
And so now it's like this almost like monster, like this Frankenstein of a coding language.
How many APIs does it have, dude? It's got so many.
Dude, it's insane. Crazy. It's insane. Yeah. I mean, you can look at a website and just start looking at all the attributes for like it's ridiculous, right? But like in the end, it's pretty cool because you can do almost everything with it, right? Like you don't need any other languages, right? You don't need like anything else. You can do almost everything you want with JavaScript exclusively.
It's awesome too, because when you learn to make like the site interactive, so it's more enjoyable for users, easier to follow, but then it's also connecting to data. JavaScript's awesome for like connecting to APIs, getting information, getting data, doing stuff with it, because a website is just information. And if you're not doing stuff with data, it's not doing anything, It might just giving people information. That's one thing, but beyond that, you need it.
Totally. All right, well, let's get into it. So these are 25 tips and tricks from ChatGPT about how to become a better front-end developer. And I think some of this is, pretty basic. It's not so much how to become a better developer or tips or tricks. It's just like if you want to become a developer, you should do these things. So
you need some stuff.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with number one.
Number one, code.
Yeah. Number one is I mean, that's just a general, like, if you want to become a developer, you have to code, right? You can watch every tutorial under the sun, but you're not a developer until you actually put stuff down on paper.
And to that point too, I mean, I know from like our cohort, like with the boot camp, also write it out yourself. Don't copy and paste, especially at the beginning. Just literally type it all out, because you need to see how those things connect and start understanding how these things relate. Yeah, it's crucial.
Even if you're watching a tutorial where somebody says just copy and paste this, it's usually better to type it out. I know it takes longer, but you train your brain like how to put these things together instead of just being like, I think there's a big difference between being able to read code and being able to produce code. It's sort of like when you speak a foreign language, there's a big difference between understanding what other people are saying. Like, I can understand Spanish very well when other people speak it around me. But if I try to put a sentence together in Spanish, I'll look like an idiot, right? Big difference there. I'm not a Spanish speaker, but I can understand it. And it's the same with coding. Like, you can look at code and pretty easily understand what's going on in most cases. I mean, especially now, because most code is human readable or somewhat.
Well, once you already understand one or two languages, they have a lot of similarities. You can see what's going on, but you can't write it. Like, I can understand, like, I can look at PHP or C and I can tell what's going on. Exactly. But I can't necessarily like produce it.
Exactly. So, and the only way to be able to do that is by actually doing it, right? And making mistakes, fucking up, and fixing it. So,
using ChatGPT.
Or using ChatGPT. That's option 2.
That helps.
So, that only get you so far too, right? Because ChatGPT is not always right. So
you also have to know what you're looking at to use it, because to ask the right questions and also to know when it's messing up, you have to understand enough to actually be able to ask questions. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I have a feeling like these 25 are going to be really difficult to get through based on our current pace, but let's go for it. So number one is learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript thoroughly, as these are the core technologies for front-end development. Would you guys agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think you have to have an understanding, because even if you're using frameworks, you need to understand how those are structured, how they work, so that you can actually like understand what you're trying to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody who's like brand new, these are sort of the 3, you can call them coding languages. Some people might get upset at you for that, but 3 languages that you really need to understand for front-end development. HTML is essentially the skeleton of a website. It tells you semantically like what is on that website and more or less where it goes. It doesn't necessarily tell
the structure.
You that,
yeah, it gives you the structure of the page. Right? Yeah.
So it's like every time I put a heading on the page, I'm going to use an H1 tag. Every time I put, I want to create a form, I'm going to do form and inputs and a button, right? So that's the structure. CSS is going to be the styling, right? So it's like what makes a website look pretty. It adds colors and fonts and sizes and positions things in certain ways and whatever. And then the final part is JavaScript. And JavaScript is your interactivity. It's like what makes things move on the page. It can also be like interactivity between websites and servers. So like if you're submitting a form, you can use JavaScript to like send that information or fetch information from a server. So it basically makes websites more dynamic, right? You guys want to add anything to that? I think that's
great.
Pretty
that's
straightforward.
Pretty good,
yeah. So you're going to need those at the core to learn web development. And I would suggest, there's tons of different ways to learn that. But again, like number one is just to start building stuff.
Go ahead, Danny. Something? Yeah, whether you're developing websites with Python and Django, React, any of these like frameworks and stuff too, or even other languages, you do need to know CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, because it's going to come up. Because like even in my I'm just finishing a project on Python and Django, and like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript make up the whole template part of that, which is the front end part, right? That everybody sees.
Yeah.
There's some tricks that are helpful for it, but like, you need it.
Yeah. I mean, at its core, every website is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Everything else like React or Next or like,
even
Django
Python is interpreted that way.
Yeah, like it's all interpreted back down into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you need to understand that at its core, even if you're using like, abstracted layers of frameworks and stuff like that. Cool. So number 2 is understand the document object model and how to manipulate it with JavaScript. What's the document object? Yeah, what's the DOM? Randall, do you know what the DOM is?
Yes, there's basically like the parent-child relationships, the website, and how you can interact with them. And dude, it's crucial for everything because it allows you to interact with entire websites. And actually, I've been watching some of these like things where they get back at the
scammer.
The scammers. They get back at scammers because this is a big thing that scammers will do is like they'll take remote control of your computer and then they'll just alter the static
Manipulate
website.
The DOM.
Yeah, exactly. They'll manipulate the DOM so it makes it look like it's doing something different or something different is happening, and then they'll get people to, I don't know, give them passwords or whatever it may be. But it's crazy because once you know this, you can basically manipulate anything on a website, change anything.
Yeah, I want to explain it a little bit.
And
get back to that. Yeah, go ahead, Danny.
Sorry, I just want to say, when you're manipulating the DOM, like using JavaScript with the API to like actually pinpoint certain parts or elements of the page and then do stuff with them. So you might grab like, a title because of its ID or something, and then you might, if a user, hovers over it, it changes color or something, or something simple like that, whatever it is.
Yeah. So like just to sort of extend on what Danny is saying. So the DOM or document object model is just a way of sort of thinking about web pages as a document, and really not as a document, as an object, right? So the document is what you're sort of seeing, and the object is this like more or less JSON object of all of the different nodes on a website. And a node is basically any like HTML attribute or any part of the website, right? So by understanding this model and how all of these things correlate together, like you have, the full document, and then under that you have the body of the document. And then inside of the body of the document, there may be like an H1 title, and then there might be an input. And so as a front-end developer, you can use this model that you have in your brain sort of like how the website works to select different parts of that website and alter them. So you can use JavaScript to select, let's say, like what Danny was saying, like a text node. So like a piece of text in that document. And then when your cursor hovers over it, it's going to change color or something like that. Right. In Randall's case, like what he was explaining with scammers, what they do is they actually like they'll get somebody on a phone and they'll have them bring up their bank account, and then they'll share like their, what do you call that? Where you like allow somebody to sort of take over your computer.
Remote desktop.
Yeah. So they use like remote desktop, and then they'll actually inspect the page of like their bank account, and they'll alter the balance number, like their bank account balance, and say, oh, we accidentally sent you like $40,000. You need to send it back to us. And the people just don't realize that they've changed the numbers on the page, but it's not really reflecting their bank account. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, you have to remember, like the way that works is like what you're seeing is what your browser renders, right? But once you have access to your browser, you can change whatever you want on that page. It's not affecting the back end. It's not affecting the server. It's just changing what you're seeing, right? And I mean, keep that in mind, because that's an important distinction to make too.
Yeah, and so that's how we add interactivity to a website, is with the code, we manipulate the DOM and have it do things. So, all right. So the next one is number 3 is keep up with the latest HTML and CSS specifications and best practices. What do you think?
I would say no. Because like HTML5, it hasn't changed in what, like a decade or something like that?
It hasn't changed in a while. Yeah.
The only thing I would say on that though is like, it is important with like responsiveness, accessibility. There are things that are helpful to keep on top of just to make like good websites, SEO stuff. I mean, a lot of that is just knowing best practices and putting those in place. I think there's some stuff like with responsiveness, especially accessibility, I would definitely argue for.
Yeah. I think if it said like keep on top of your latest frameworks, that would be important because they change like on the daily.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think if you just continue to code and
Keep up
build
with it.
projects, you're sort of gonna be on top of this. And then anything that's big, like I think maybe this one needs to be more generalized, right? So like, I don't code a ton of just like HTML and CSS websites. Usually I'm like React and like Tailwind, right? And so the other day I watched like a Tailwind keynote that was really awesome because there were like new features that they just released for Tailwind. So I think it's important maybe to just keep up on the things that you use often. And obviously if there's any, like if HTML6 comes out, you should probably learn about what's going on with that. But
to your point too, like stuff you're using, especially, it's important to keep up on because like, I knew with Python, when they jumped from 3.9 to 3.10 or 11, they did make some crucial changes that made me question, like, do I want to update this to the newest model or not? Like, because there's some changes that might make it better functionality. So it is good to know that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. There's things like, there's always, I mean, like to Randy's point too, like their frameworks change very frequently. Like, and a lot of times they are backwards compatible, but then, eventually they sunset some of the old features. Like one of the things that I've been dealing with a lot is like React Router DOM, which is how you route between pages in a React app. And there's like a newer version, but my personal feeling is like the old stuff works better, or it's just cleaner code. And so
I actually agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But
like I just go back and forth between like, should I use the old thing that still works because it looks cleaner, or should I use the new thing because it has advanced features, but I don't use them? So like,
that's also important though, to understand your needs and like what actually is being offered. Cause like, and that's a huge thing for when you're developing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next one, number 4, learn responsive web design to create websites that work well on all screen sizes.
Yes.
So what is responsive web design? Anyone want to answer that?
Sure, I guess. I mean, usually like responsive web design, we design now usually for mobile first, because most people use their, use web pages on their phone. If you're old like us, you might remember, right, when they had the mobile
when there weren't
browser. You remember the mobile sites?
M. Whatever.
Yeah. Because the mobile site was
the
stripped down site so your phone could access because they didn't have the bandwidth. But now, now the browsers are powerful. So what that means is, making it so that no matter what your screen size is, the viewport, the actual window that the user is looking at, the page still looks right and functions. So whether I'm on my phone, if I switch to my desktop, it'll be fine, even though the page has gotten a lot bigger. All the information is still accessible. It's still there. That might mean, using different nav styles and stuff. It might mean, certain content's like hidden, just depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, you can see this too. If you're on a desktop, you can sort of get an idea of what responsiveness means. If you're on like a desktop, just full screen, like a window, and then, or not full screen, but like open a window, like all the way to cover your screen, and then go to a website and slowly just drag like the right side of the window smaller and smaller. And you'll see the things on the page move around to adapt so that they're not covering each other or like off the page. Basically everything that you should see is still there when you go from a mobile size screen all the way up to like a full giant desktop screen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's super important, because if you have a website that's not responsive, and it's going to look like shit.
Plus nobody's going to use it. Cause like, I think what's the stat? It's like over 50% of people just use their phone or the internet. So it's yeah.
I mean, I think people are more frequently in front of a phone. You have your phone on you all day. I mean, I think personally, like I don't not have my phone on me at pretty much any time of the day, so, and I think that's pretty common. All right. Number 5, master CSS Flexbox and CSS Grid for layout design. What do you think about those?
I think that CSS is way under stress the importance of, because it's literally how you make a website look appealing. And it's like everybody skips over CSS, or like, okay, learn HTML and then JavaScript and then React or whatever it may be. And like nobody gives CSS the attention that it deserves, because it's literally how you make, I mean, granted, there are some new things that'll do it for you, but it's literally how you make a website look good.
Yeah. No, I wanted to say, what you said is right. Like, I think CSS is crucial. I think like some of those features I think are easier to use once you understand them in a framework. It just makes it faster. And so you probably will end up using a framework, but you need to know CSS, because I find in most of my projects, even when I use a framework, I'm still using regular CSS as well, just to tweak things and make them exactly like I want. So you do need to understand it, because it is crucial. But
I think one of the reasons why people don't put as much attention on CSS is just that it's a little bit difficult to understand at first, I think, especially because if you're coding with just HTML and CSS and JavaScript, like without like a web framework or anything like that, and even with that, sometimes you're going back and forth between files like over and over, like you're going, so you have to like sort of have an HTML file and then have a CSS file either next to it or switch between screens to see, like, I'm typing something into my CSS file and it's affecting what I'm seeing on the browser, right? And I have to associate that with my HTML as well. So it can get a little bit complicated. And that's why I like using Tailwind so much, because basically all your CSS exists in your, all three, your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all are in one spot. So you don't have to keep switching between screens, which I like a lot. But you definitely need to understand CSS very well to create good looking websites, because you need to know what you can change and what what words you need to use to change that, right?
You even just know simply too how CSS is applied, so that you understand when it's not working.
Exactly. That's another, I remember before I knew coding pretty well, I used to get, this is back in the day when I used to write WordPress sites, and I would always get confused because I would change CSS and it wouldn't change something. And it was because of CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So they literally cascade. So there's a level of importance of the different things that you put in there, and anything that's more specific will be the more important one. And so I would change CSS and WordPress and be like, what the fuck? Nothing changed. And it's because there was somewhere down the road, there was a more specific class or something that was assigned to that, and it wasn't working. So understanding both how to write CSS, but also how CSS is interpreted, I think is very important. And to this point, Flexbox and Grid are basically the two main ways that you would style positioning of components, how they lay out. So Flexbox is sort of based on 12 columns and then flexing over that 12 columns, whereas Grid is a grid layout, what you would imagine Airbnb is built with, right? Because it's a big grid of houses. So I think it's important to understand those two and how they work, because you do end up using them pretty much every time you ever code a website.
Yeah.
All right, number 6, use version. Go ahead.
I was gonna say before we go through this whole list, why don't we just finish off with one or two things that we just think is super important about this, and then.
Oh yeah, okay.
That's a good idea.
Go through all of them. How about I just read the rest of them, and then you guys tell me what your thoughts are on the best. I know it's gonna be. We'll be here
sounds good.
At 6 p.m.
Do it.
Yeah.
All right. So number 6 is use version control systems like Git to track changes in your code. All right. Number 7, familiarize yourself with CSS preprocessors like Sass and Less to streamline your CSS workflow. Number 8, optimize your images and assets for faster loading times. Number 9, study design principles and user experience design to create visually appealing and user-friendly interfaces. Number 10, experiment with CSS animations and transitions to add interactivity to your websites. Number 11, practice writing clean and organized code to make debugging and maintenance easier. Number 12, learn a JavaScript framework or library like React, Vue, or Angular. Number 13, use developer tools in browsers for debugging and profiling your code. Number 14, implement web accessibility best practices to make your sites usable for everyone. Get comfortable with using API. Sorry, this is number 15. Get comfortable with using APIs and fetch and display data from servers. Number 16, learn about browser compatibility issues and how to address them. Number 17, keep your skills updated by following front-end development blogs, forums, and tutorials. Number 18, collaborate with back-end developers to understand how front-end and back-end interact. Number 19, use code editors with extensions and plugins to enhance your productivity. Number 20, practice responsive typography to ensure readability on all devices. Number 21, optimize your website for search engines SEO by using semantic HTML and metadata. Number 22, experiment with modern CSS frameworks. Features like custom properties, CSS variables, CSS in JS. Number 23, test your websites on different browsers and devices to ensure cross-browser compatibility. Number 24, build and maintain a portfolio of your work to showcase your skills to potential employers and clients. And number 25, participate in open source projects and contribute to developer community to gain real world experience. I know that was a lot. So what do you guys think? Which ones like stood out to you?
I think there's a lot of good tips. I would say if you're starting out, the most important thing is don't worry about optimization at first. Worry on practicing and understanding the code first. Once you can read it and stuff, they can get more complicated stuff. I think version control is great. Getting used to Git early is helpful. I think that's a good idea. Responsiveness is crazy important, so you should understand that, and you will when you get to understand like CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. That's my 2 cents. You guys go.
I agree with Danny. Like this list was like kind of everything you could possibly do to be a web developer.
Yeah.
I think early on it's essential to just code and keep doing it. One thing that I like to do is code the same thing over and over again. Because the first time through, you have no idea what anything is. And you're like, I don't understand any of this. I'm going to give up. And then the second time through, you're like, oh yeah, that's the kind of thing that did that. And then like the third, fourth time through, you really start to understand exactly what it is. Because it's kind of like how they taught us to write when we were in elementary school. You just do it over and over again and you get it.
I really like that suggestion a lot. I think because I think when I was first getting into coding, I was so scared of making a mistake, like of doing something wrong that would like break the program or something like that. And so I held back from actually coding a lot of times because I was like, ooh, what if I mess something up or I get an error? Like I hated getting like red error text. So I would just like not code shit. And then I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I'm not learning anything because I'm not actually doing it.
Well, I think remember too that all coding is problem solving. And like, you know, I know what you mean though. I was so scared when I first started breaking things that I already built. So I would be really hesitant to change it. But then I just realized it's like, when I built this, I can build it again. Who cares? And it's about problem solving. So once you break it, you have a problem. Now you can solve it and then you remember it. And so it's very helpful. Yeah, you just got to keep doing it.
For anybody who's having that fear, I have a solution for you. Okay. So if you have the fear of like breaking something or like making a mistake and like screwing up a program or like destroying a website or whatever, number one is you should learn Git, because if you learn Git, then if you ever make a mistake, you can just go back to a previous version of your code. And so your mistake will be erased.
Or just branch it, and try different things. Yeah,
exactly. The second thing I would suggest, or sort of my, I don't know, suggestion for this is don't be scared, because in the worst case scenario, if you like totally break a website or something like that, and you're just completely lost and have no clue what you're doing, just copy and paste your exact code into ChatGPT and say, what is wrong with this code? And you will actually, it will print out like a detailed outline of everything that's wrong with the code and how to fix it. And that's one of the best ways, in my opinion, to actually learn, because you've made a mistake, then you find like a mentor, which is ChatGPT. I mean, it's like we have such an advantage now as developers having this tool available to us. It's crazy. So use it, right? Like don't write code necessarily with only ChatGPT, but use it as your mentor. So if you're having an issue and you're like, I can't figure out how to get this to work, just paste the code that you're working on into ChatGPT, ask it a question about it, and you'll get a really good response, which, like in my experience, has helped me become a much better developer, because I'm going from a place of completely like, I am completely lost, don't understand what's going on, to having somebody explain something to me, and then also being able to like prompt it with more questions. Like, I don't understand this part, or explain this in more detail. Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old, something like
or
that.
give me multiple options, like how can I do
Exactly.
this 3 different ways or whatever? Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
way to just learn different tactics for solving a problem. And that's all programming is. It's just solving problems,
Totally.
Awesome.
Any other ones that you guys want to point out? I think for me, like the big ones, if you're just getting into coding, you obviously need to understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Like that's core to anything. And then I would say like learning a JavaScript framework is a good next step, because I particularly like React. I'm working on learning more Next right now, but there's a bunch of them out there. React is by far the most popular. So if you're looking for a job, that might be a good option to start with, or you might choose actually a less popular one, because then you might actually have more possibility of getting a job because there's less people that know that, right? So, up to you on that. But I would say definitely learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript framework, and then really what you guys said, which is just code, like code. I would also say from a front-end developer perspective, learn a little bit about design principles. In most cases, as a front-end developer, you're probably not going to be designing websites so much as just like taking a design and turning it into reality. But it's worthwhile understanding like how to actually structure a website, how to like size text and place text based on, semantic like usage and things like that. Like a title should be bolder and larger than like a subtitle, right? Like things like that, pretty simple, but understanding that, like how white space is used on a website, I think is super helpful for a front-end developer. And then I think the other one that was in here that I thought was probably pretty useful is, and this is like sort of getting to the next step, but I think it's really important, is to understand APIs and how to fetch data from servers, because that's back-end development, and front-end and back-end are very intertwined. So you need to sort of understand how the front of the website is going to engage with the back of the website.
How data is moved around, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Awesome.
Any other? No. All right. I think that's good for today. So thank you guys for tuning in. Again, happy Saturday. Enjoy your day. And we will see you next Saturday for another one just like this.
Awesome.
All right.
Later,
Peace,
fellas.
guys.